This is Twit.
We got an email. Kevin wrote in says, surely you've seen this.
Oh, we have.
And we have.
We meant to talk about it last week. We ran out of time.
And he's referring to an article about a best-selling app. I don't know, Brian, if we could pull up the article that he says, surely you've seen this. Kevin says, the key takeaway, Apple's vetting process, they say, takes weeks. Google's can take 60 seconds. And this isn't referring to a bogus app that was claiming to be the best-selling app, which turned out to be a scam.
Yeah, I mean, the weird thing about this one, right, is that it launched in the Play Store. I'm not sure actually when it launched, but it took off, and it was $3.99. It was a virus scanning app or whatever. Yep. Ultimately, it did nothing. Like, from what I understand, you'd install it and you click it, and it would kind of change from an X to a check, making you think that, oh, great, it's scanned and everything's okay. It didn't. From what I understand, didn't do anything malicious. It just didn't do anything.
It just took your money, right?
It just took your money.
That's what it did.
But the thing is, because people were buying it, it kind of rose through the ranks of the rating system of best new apps, and suddenly it was number one because everyone was buying it because everyone was buying it.
Right.
And
there was like zero footprint. It didn't use up any battery or anything. The scanning happened so quickly.
So
it's enough to make you distrust progress bars for the rest of your life.
Exactly.
Yeah,
We're
right.
built around this whole idea that progress bar means something. That it's not just a simple animated GIF or some sort of bit of animation. It's kind of like. Speaking of which, baseball season just started. I remember once back when I used to work at Revision 3, I used to take the Muni to work in the morning, and it goes right by the Giants ballpark. And at 8 a.m., I'm going on the Muni, and they were testing the graphics. This is like in March. So they were testing all the graphics, and I could see into the ballpark. And on the big diamond vision, I saw the meter that is supposed to be registering the crowd noise. And it was just going up, but there was
Reality
no crowd.
Shattering.
Yeah, exactly. Ruined baseball for me for the rest of my life.
Some folks in the chat room are saying, oh, there we go. All right.
How much of the show is done? This progress bar will tell you.
Yeah, if that progress bar knew how much of the show is done, man, that's impressive. Some folks in the chat room were saying that a lot of the purchases were fake. That actually brings up a really good point. If somebody goes in and purchases an app and then gets a 30-minute or a refund in 30 minutes, is it still logged as a download?
That's a good question.
And if so, that apparently that might be what happened here to kind of raise that number. And I don't know. Ultimately, the question being, is Google's 60-second, as this says in this email, approval process for an app, is that good enough for something?
Well, yeah, and so Kevin also says in his email, he says, in a similar vein, the other day, my weather app ominously announced that it had detected a virus on my phone. Of course, it was just a very deceptive ad served through the ad network the app uses. Google needs to police in-app ad networks as well as the apps themselves better. So just overall, should Google be policing these apps a bit more?
Or is its current setup good enough because it catches it eventually? The problem with that is eventually that's kind of a slippery slope, and are these people getting their money back? Or
but here's the thing:
I
is that
imagine they are.
compared to the draconian iOS standards that Apple is doing, which sometimes can be maddening, or is kind of crazy. I'd rather have open and just buyer beware, and just kind of it becomes more street smarts versus you can only total control, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you have to keep in mind that the iOS App Store takes. I think they said it was it can take up to 12 hours or 2 weeks to vet. And yet they still have chess games in their store that are labeled Halo 4 the day that the game launches.
Yeah.
So that, people go and spend, $10 or whatever thinking that they're getting some kind of early look at Halo 4 and access code or something like that when it turns out to be just a clone chess game. So, I mean, iOS is definitely not immune to this, and they haven't been. I mean, they've tried several times to do this. And like you said, Ron, it's, they go through and they do this, but then once it's installed on the phone, Apple doesn't go back and look at those applications. So the situation that we had a couple weeks ago where there were apps that when the phone was dormant, it was mining Bitcoin for some guy, pretty far away, that kind of thing doesn't get detected on other platforms. Mm-hmm. So it's weird, it's a kind of give and take. Google probably could work a little harder in the beginning, but I think it is definitely more significant that they work harder all the rest of the time as well.
Russell,
Good point.
Can you go back? What is that mining Bitcoin you mentioned? How does one get in on that?
Yeah, no.
Well, apparently you install this app.
What app
and
is
then
that?
you're
What
mining
app is that
Bitcoin.
I need to-
So it's definitely not mining Bitcoin for you. It's
Right.
definitely mining
That's the
Bitcoin for
problem.
someone
That's the
okay,
big
I see.
problem
All right,
here.
all right, yeah.
Yeah, it's not your Bitcoin. But who knows? Maybe you could create an app. Yeah, Gina.
Apple actually has human reviewers that look
Yes.
at apps, right? And Google does not. And Google's never going to do it, right? I mean, remember back in the day, Yahoo had like humans actually organizing links, indexing the web and organizing links under categories. And
Yeah,
Google was like,
it
we're
was
just
an
going to do this by an
index.
algorithm, right? Like, so Google's doing the same thing. They're just doing this algorithmically. And I believe that their algorithmic focus is, does this do something malicious? Now, I mean, arguably Virus Shield or whatever it was called wasn't doing anything malicious. It just wasn't doing what it said it was, gonna do, which I guess is malicious in some ways, but it wasn't hurting you, right? I mean, I think in order for an algorithm to determine that an app does the things that its description says, would be a pretty hard problem, even for Google, right?
Yeah.
You really kind of need a human to say, okay, let's throw some viruses at this thing and see if it flags anything.
Sure.
Or to parse through the code, which is, I guess, what they did on GitHub, and be like, oh, this is just changing the checkbox.
Or
you know?
monitor
So-
the process and say, oh, when you push that button, absolutely nothing happens.
This is what happened. Yeah. But
Right.
the human review process at Apple has its flaws as well too. And when
Definitely.
we're offline, I could tell you stories admittedly more on the content side than on the app side. But the human review process at Apple it can be maddening at times.
Definitely.
You get conflicting reviews. You get one something gets through, but the other something doesn't because two different people looked at it, and so there are holes there as well too. And what is the right way? I don't know. I mean, I think Google's, like you said, Google's algorithmic approach, and then calling on the community and calling on the masses to report stuff and to look into it, I think ultimately gets to the right kind of thing. Thank God this app wasn't mining Bitcoin for somebody, not me.
Right.
But or doing something super malicious to the phone. It was just kind of innocuous. But yeah, I mean,
I get the feeling Ron's going to go home and do some real research into this whole mining Bitcoin app thing.
I'm gonna really look into it. I mean,
next
just
He
week's
needs to buy
app
some
showdown
ramen.
is going to be the Ron Richards app, and
I mean,
He's like, I've got a really good idea for an app that I can finally develop here.
I want the ramen at this restaurant is really good, and if they're only taking Bitcoin, I don't want to get edged out. So I'm just saying that.
Or cash, Ron.
All right, yeah, but how much longer? How much longer? I mean, seriously.
Very true. Good point.